"We're approaching the objective. Weapons ready, but do not fire unless I order it," Redford commanded, and a second later, he was alerted by dozens of quick confirmations. His Talon was, in his opinion, a sorry sight. Incomplete squadrons broke apart the standard grouping of wedges, which, in turn, broke up the wings, and finally gave him a fractured Talon that barely qualified as one with 240 fighters available, and only a few squadrons left behind as reserves just in case they were needed. As a commander, he was used to managing and conducting several dozens of Talons at once in battle. Being reduced to a single splintered Talon was a low point in his career. Or it would be were it not for the circumstances that led him to his current position. "Damn you, Cornelius! Whatever possessed you to commit such betrayal?" he asked himself, wishing he could know that answer. Memories came to him of serving faithfully the previous prince, his friend and liege. Of Cornelius stood next to the prince the day he was crowned, of how out of all the siblings, Cornelius was the one who accepted his demotion with grace and the stewardship of Camrim, forever relinquishing the Astor name and taking the mantle of Draymore with gusto and the deepest honor. "What changed, Cornelius, for you to set your duties and honor aside?" Redford thought bitterly. Setting those thoughts aside, he focused on the task at hand once his sensors detected the plume of the black ship. Oddly enough, it made no attempts to attack or steer away from its current path. "All fighters, form up in a square formation and advance as one," he ordered. Moments later, he watched in his tactical display that all fighters had created a vertical square with only a few hundred meters separating each fighter from the other. It was an effective defensive screen that announced to anyone close by that they were there and that they were ready to attack. If the black ship suddenly fired on them, the formation could easily split apart and move in as a swarm of deadly insects. "Computer, ping them," Redford commanded. "Ping sent. Awaiting a response," the AI replied. Several seconds passed until it spoke up again. "Connection request received. Accept?" "Accept," Redford replied, straightening his back as he prepared to deal with the captain of the dreadful black ship. "Redford, is that you?" Of all the possibilities running through his mind, hearing the voice of Cynthia was not among them. Cynthia, is that you?" he asked, cursing mentally that he allowed his surprise to show, no matter how warranted it was. "It is you, Redford," Cynthia said, relief clear in her otherwise measured, stoic voice. "I'm seeing your formation. Stand down. The Nornavio is friendly." Redford blinked in confusion. "The... what?" He shook his head, dispelling his momentary puzzlement. "You captured that ship? How? When did you... Wait, if you're here, then that means Princess Clara is with you," he asked, hoping to be correct. "Unfortunately, Clara is not with me, Redford. My princess is in Woodshaft," Cynthia replied. "That explains the change in course," Redford commented, frowning. "Why are you aboard that vessel?" he asked more firmly. "I shall explain the details in person, Redford. Board the ship. You can order your fighters to return to the fleet. They won't be needed anymore now that the cowards are in full retreat. They will be needed more to protect the prince," Cynthia proposed. "Nonsense. If they return, this ship is likely to be their target again. All fighters, break formation. Proceed to form an escort shell around the Nornavio. I can confirm that the vessel is friendly. I repeat, the ship is friendly." A string of affirmative answers coming from the wing commanders followed, and he moved closer to the black ship. "Cynthia, I presume the reason you are on that ship is related to an order given by Clara?" "You assume correctly, Redford. It is by her order and the deal struck between her and Uriel Hoax that I am here alongside a dozen Royal Marines, several captured prisoners, and Lieutenant Wyatt," Cynthia replied. "I will not inquire further until we are standing in the same room, Cynthia. I have visual confirmation of the Nornavio," Redford said, pausing for a moment as his video feed showed the ship in all its deadly glory. "Sweet heavens, that's a stealth ship?" he asked with incredulity. "It has to be as well armed as the Exalted Virtue. More so, if my readings are correct. You're not powering down weapons?" "Not until those things are gone. I do not wish to take any risks," Cynthia replied. "I'll send you the details of the Nornavio," she affirmed. A few seconds later, Redford received the data and went over them several times in half a minute, making sure not a single detail would miss his attention. "Who made the ship? he asked, unable to form any other words. Further information has been purged. We're flying without an AI. The Royal Marines and I are acting as a bridge between the systems, but it is starting to drain us. We have to make it back to Woodshaft soon, Cynthia replied. Understood. I shall arrive soon. One last question, Cynthia. Redford paused. Nornavio, I was unaware that you had such a sense of humor. That, Redford, is something I cannot answer directly, for it was the command of my princess, Cynthia replied. I shall leave the hangar open for your arrival. The connection ended a second later, and Redford was left both worried and relieved. If Princess Clara was in Woodshaft, then she was at risk just like the prince feared. But at the same time, knowing that the black ship was under the command of Cynthia and that a costly fight had been avoided, eased his racing heart. It took him a few minutes to reach the Noir Navio proper alongside his fighters, who in turn moved to create a sphere around the vessel. He quickly made out the hangar bay open and the protective energy shield keeping any unwanted out. The shield dropped as he entered, only to reactivate a few moments later alongside the hangar bay closing, and the protective kinetic shield dissipated. By the time his fighter was stationed, the hangar was repressurized. Exiting his Raptor fighter wearing an armored suit befitting for a man of his position, Redford looked around the solitary bay and activated the map Cynthia had sent alongside the information regarding the ship's details. Before exiting the bay, however, he noticed a heavily damaged fighter and stopped for a moment, taking note of all the damage it had gone through. It was as if someone put the fighter inside a giant blender for a few moments, then chewed on it, and finally spat it out, he thought, wondering what could have caused such damage. I'll be surprised if that fighter isn't decommissioned, he murmured before continuing on his way. He didn't run. There would be no point in doing so. Woodshaft was still far away, and there was no urgent matter at the present moment that required his attention. Still, his usual calm walking speed was now hurried, his desire to know what happened burning in his chest. It took him several minutes of travel and silent appreciation for the beauty of the ship's architecture, but at long last he made it to the bridge where the Royal Marines stood proudly alongside some crew members wearing Caiston-colored uniforms. The sight of the red-armored young woman eased his heart while she sat on the captain's chair. A ping resonated in his helmet as he accepted the connection. Cynthia. Redford, Cynthia replied before standing up, wires returning to her armor. Turning to face the older man, she approached him and gave him a short-lived hug. It is good to see you again, old man. The sentiment is mutual, Cynthia. Juliana will be relieved that you are alive, unharmed, and that you obeyed your princess's orders, Redford praised, ending the hug. Her surprise will be vast once she discovers that you are not in Woodshaft protecting Clara, I believe. She shall understand given the circumstances, though. Cynthia nodded. Come, follow me. I wish to talk face to face, she said, inviting the commander to follow her. Redford accepted the invitation and followed her out the bridge and down a hallway until they reached the mess hall. Sitting on a table, the two took off their helmets and set them aside. It is good to see that you are indeed unharmed, Redford once again said, relieved. Likewise, Redford, Cynthia replied. What do you wish to know first? Begin from the start, Cynthia. Why are you here? What happened to the crew? I saw no one until I reached the bridge. Why is a Drazan raiding fleet running away? He asked, his gaze stern and focused. Cynthia closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep, calming breath, and told the gray-haired man everything after they arrived at Woodshaft, their reunion with Uriel Hoax, the deal struck, the assault on the Caiston secret station, and the capture of the vessel. Redford took in every detail and word of the blue-haired woman, raising his hand only after she described Samuel's ploy and death. Wyatt executed him without a shred of remorse? Cynthia nodded. He showed no pity, no mercy, no decorum. He treated the Caiston rat as a mere vermin that needed to be dealt with. The commander crossed his arms and frowned. Samuel issued a duel, so capturing him was out of the question. Can't say I wouldn't do the same if I was in his place. A traitor he was, but he was loyal to his house. It is a shame that such measures were needed, he commented. Under any other circumstances, Wyatt would be dishonorably discharged and quite possibly executed for his cold-blooded murder of a high-ranking noble. None other than you, my sister, my princess, and the prince himself shall know the truth. The royal marines and the prisoners shall be censored and dealt with if necessary. Let his death be recorded at my hands, Cynthia replied. Redford studied Cynthia's expression for several long seconds before nodding once. Very well, I shall aid you in this endeavor. If the truth is known, Wyatt would still face recrimination from the more traditional nobles among us. Tell me, Cynthia, why would you risk yourself for Wyatt's sake? What risk is there to take? The duel was issued. I executed Samuel Cayston. The body and that of his crew were disposed of. None shall question a Winfield, she replied matter-of-factly. I understand, Redford nodded once. What about the prisoners? Why were they spared despite Clara's command? Wyatt interfered on their behalf, taking responsibility for their actions. She paused for a moment. He could have easily killed any of them, but didn't. I'm not sure if it was due to a sense of honor or some moral quandary. Regardless, he suspected that they may know of possible sabotage actions or lingering information concealed from us. His suspicion proved to be correct, and we gained access through the system's encryption after a short altercation. Again, he showed restraint and mercy. She smirked slightly. Paradoxical. Redford resisted the urge to pinch the bridge of his nose in frustration. The more I know about Wyatt Staples, the more confounded I am, he said with a sigh. Speaking of him, where is the lieutenant? Cynthia closed her eyes and exhaled slowly before opening them again. Her icy stare softened. Wyatt is in the infirmary. To be more precise, he's in a Medicare pod. Redford was taken aback by her answer. I don't understand. When did he engage in combat to warrant— No, Cynthia, when I arrived I saw a mangled fighter. Did Wyatt fly out on his own to confront the Drazen? He asked seriously, but his tone conveyed the monumental absurdity of what he saw as nothing short of a suicidal idea. Redford! Wyatt is the reason the Drazen fleet was dealt such a terrible blow, Cynthia confessed. What do you mean by that? Redford retorted as he leaned forth. A single fighter can't take down a prepared warship. His performance during the ZTK 990 simulation was one thing, but this is another entirely. How was that possible? It isn't, she replied, because he didn't do it with a fighter. He convinced me that we should use the Nornavio and inflict as much damage to the Drazen as possible to give the defenders a better fighting chance and grant the prince some more time. He left in a fighter to set a trap against any boarding pods and shuttles the Drazen could deploy. I do not understand why he did it. It is hard to interpret his intentions. I believe that he simply wished to inflict as many casualties as possible, no matter how little his contribution was. I can't say I wouldn't do the same. In any boarding action, every able soldier counts, so inflicting as many casualties before they are deployed is a sound tactic, no matter how utterly suicidal the idea of a single fighter preparing an ambush is. Given the state of his fighter, I imagine the trap was unsuccessful. Cynthia gritted her teeth angrily. Yes and no. Redford. I accessed the records of the fighter after placing Wyatt in the pod. He tricked me, she said bitterly. He didn't hide that he encountered Drazen fighters, ruining his plan. But I was led to believe that he fought off 3 or 4 and that the injuries he sustained were minor at best. I didn't inquire further. The older man hummed deeply. Given his skill, I can see him fighting off a squadron of Drazen fighters by himself. The damage I noticed on the fighter speaks of a pitched battle, he replied. Redford, put on your helmet. Let me show you the record itself, Cynthia proposed. Taking her word for it and intrigued about Wyatt's performance, he put on his helmet. A moment later, he received a video feed. The gray-haired man was left speechless when he saw, from the fighter's perspective, how Wyatt Staples dealt with 30 Drazen fighters at the same time, tricking them, using his tactical mind and everything at his disposal to eliminate the enemy as quickly and mercilessly as possible. Impossible. 30 fighters? On his own? Redford muttered, shocked. I knew he had talent, but such reckless abandon, such drive. He obliterated my record in a real fight 3 times over. Taking off his helmet, he set it aside and looked at Cynthia directly in the eye. How did he trick you? He made me believe his injuries were inconsequential. He put on a convincing act that he was lightly wounded at best. Then, I gave him command over the Noir Navio, she said, and watched as Redford's face turned paler than it already was. It was a sound decision, Redford. He made me realize that I was unsuited for direct command and that my strategy was brutish and ineffective. Bereft of options, I granted him temporary command of the ship and engaged in combat against the Drazen. Did you manage to get a reading of the enemy numbers? Redford asked, his voice as cold as a gravestone. 3 destroyer-class and 2 cruiser-class ships. I have safeguarded the footage and the records. They won't be tampered with. The prince and my princess shall be the first to see them. But Redford, trust me when I say this. Wyatt not only managed to disable a destroyer, he also destroyed one of the cruisers. I have the coordinates of the destroyer, too, and the possible vector it took after it was disabled, she said, frowning. After that, Wyatt passed out and I discovered the truth of his injuries. I injected him with 1/5 of a dose of nanogel. I saw no other option to save his life. It worked, barely. He nearly died. That's how... He's a commoner without experience in regards to command, Redford muttered, unable to process what he had been told. The prince... He ordered that I should keep Wyatt close and perhaps develop commanding skills suitable to groom him into a capable aide. Maybe even turn him into an exceptional lieutenant commander given his talent. This changes everything I had planned for him. Redford sighed in exasperation. Cynthia, did I hear right? Nanogel, you injected him with nanogel and he survived? It was 1/5 of a dose, she repeated. Any more than that without the proper implants would have killed him on the spot. In regards to his handling of the ship, he treated the Noir Navio as if he was piloting a fighter, Redford, Cynthia clarified. It was impressive to say the least, and yet I saw a glimpse of him I didn't see before. There was no shame in it either. I do not know if it was due to his injuries or if he doesn't care about letting people see that side of him. She paused for a moment, waiting to see if Redford had anything to say, but the older man seemed to be too engrossed in her recounting to interrupt. After beating the Drazen ships, Wyatt laughed. He reveled in their destruction, Redford. He used trickery and planned around their movements to destroy them effectively. He is, without a doubt, unaware of the rules of engagement regarding ship-to-ship actions, but I'm certain he wouldn't care and would have actively gone against them. He was precise, savage, yet cautious and deceptive. Redford leaned back on his seat, bringing a hand to cover his eyes and rest his forehead for several long, silent minutes of contemplation. This cannot be divulged, Cynthia. A commoner taking command of a vessel has only happened in dire, extreme circumstances of necessity or mutinies. To learn that a commoner inflicted such devastating damage to an enemy force without a proper crew on a captured, advanced ship. The upheaval it would cause among our ranks would be catastrophic. Taking off his hand, he regained his posture. It is fortunate, then, that Wyatt Staples is a man that puts little value in personal glory. Redford, Wyatt has revealed to both my princess and me that glory, honor, and dignity are worthless to him. If my princess or the prince commands him, he will not say a word, nor do I believe he'd seek any compensation for his valiant actions. Her lips curled into a soft, gentle smile. I believe that my princess is correct. Wyatt Staples possesses the soul of a true knight. For our sake, I hope she is right in that assumption. From what I've seen of him, I am inclined to agree with Clara's opinion, he sighed. Perhaps, to him, loyalty truly is its own reward. Cynthia said nothing as she stood up and put on her helmet. Come, let us return to the bridge, Redford. The older man nodded and soon joined her. Report, Juliana, the prince said as he analyzed the carnage that covered the market area of Woodshaft. Dozens upon dozens of bodies belonging to humans and Drazen were scattered all over the place, with human survivors already working on removing the bodies. Around him, 10 Royal Marines created a protective circle while 2 companies of soldiers and a few squadrons of Marines followed closely. Right behind him, Frederick Anderson, William Hempstroke, and Hannah Talaro followed, armored, armed, and prepared to jump into action at a moment's notice. We've suffered light casualties, my prince. The defenders put up a decent fight and made those bulbous plants pay a high price for every life they took. My troops and Captain Milcades are cornering the last pockets of resistance. We'll get rid of the Drazen in a few hours at the least, maybe a day or 2 at most, Juliana replied, pausing only for a moment before continuing. I have located Princess Clara, and she's safe. Uriel Hoax provided all the security and safety he could spare to defend her." The prince exhaled heavily in relief now that he was certain his sister was safe. "Where's Cynthia?" he asked, worried about his dear friend. "I shall answer that myself, brother dearest," Clara said, her voice invading the otherwise private link between the blue-haired commander and himself. "Impatient as always, Clara. I see that not even the threat of the Drazen can take that away from you," the prince joked. "Shush you," Clara retorted. "If you must know, brother dearest, Cynthia is not with me. I sent her on a mission before this whole mess started. You'll be happy to know that 2 black ships have been captured in short order." "Allow me to congratulate you, Clara. The secrets of such vessels shall be a great boon for our cause," the prince replied. "Nevertheless, sending Cynthia on a mission was foolish, reckless, and stupid on your part. She's your bodyguard. She's meant to protect you, Clara." "I am aware, brother dearest. It was a calculated risk. I did not leave myself defenseless, if you must know. 10 Royal Marines were more than enough to keep me safe until the Drazen showed up." "No one can predict such calamities," Clara replied, her poise and tone unfaltering. "In that case, I shall refrain myself from giving my sister a piece of my mind for neglecting her duties. I can't punish her if she was following the orders of her princess, now can I?" Juliana said, chuckling at the end. "Then that means Redford met her already." "A likely scenario," the prince agreed. Silently, he was glad that was the case. One less thing to worry about was most welcomed. "How many Royal Marines perished in battle?" "4, brother dearest," Clara replied sadly. "Their aid was incalculable. Their sacrifice shall be honored and remembered. Another 7 were severely injured, but they'll recover. They died performing their duties admirably. Nothing more can be expected from them," Juliana added before letting out a short snarl. "I'll personally make sure that not a single Drazen is left alive within this station, if you'll permit me, my prince." "Permission granted, Juliana. Good hunt." Seeing the signal of her sister and his assistant AI creating the quickest path to the command chamber, he proceeded to make his way there. "The prince! It's the prince! He has saved us!" "Royalty? Here? But by the gods, it is the prince!" The prince turned those monsters away. "For the principality, long live the prince!" Grateful shouts began to resonate wherever the prince ventured to, from regular guards to militia and simple commoners holding crude weapons, desperate to defend their lives, called him, honoring him for delivering victory and salvation to them. It tugged at his heart that he had done nothing of the sort. He had planned to save as many as possible and incite the Drazen to leave, not to defeat them in battle. Something else had caused the raiding fleet to flee, and now he was certain Cynthia was the reason. He raised a hand, saluting the poor souls who had endured the Drazen boarding assault and survived the onslaught. Many fell to their knees in reverence, others cried, grateful to have been saved by the Prince of all people. "You should rejoice, my prince. They honor you as they should," said Frederick. "This is your victory." "Is it? I did little, and yet they chant as if I had done all," the prince replied, watching as more and more destitute commoners, petty criminals, merchants, smugglers, and more came out of their hiding places to catch a glimpse of him. "And yet, I cannot deny them. They are the people of the principality, misguided as they are. I am their prince. This conflict has brought me here. Tell me, Frederick, would I have ever seen this place otherwise?" "Unlikely, my liege," Frederick replied, his voice weaker and submissive. The prince hummed deeply, choosing to ignore the chanting commoners as he advanced. Soon enough, though, their cries became whispers, and then they were gone as he approached the location of his sister. Upon approach, a series of locks and a reinforced gate opened up to reveal a hidden chamber heavily fortified by automatic turrets and defensible positions. We walked inside the chamber, where a hidden panic room opened, revealing the command center of Woodshaft, and where 4 Royal Marines dutifully flanked Princess Clara Astor, protecting her from all danger. He watched Clara turn to him, and she broke into a sprint. Forgetting all decorum, the prince rushed forth, leaving his escort behind, matching his sister's response and embracing each other tightly. The hug lasted for several seconds until the prince broke it, recovering his dignified posture. "Sending Cynthia away was reckless, Clara. Necessary, but reckless." I'm overjoyed to see you unharmed, he said, smiling behind his helmet. The Drazan, as always, are unwanted, unexpected guests, brother dearest. I knew you wouldn't abandon the innocent people of Woodshaft to die at their tendrils when you could have done something about it, Clara replied, also smiling behind her helmet. They were my secondary concern, Clara. You and Cynthia were my priority. I am, however, relieved that the situation turned in our favor, the prince declared, and then turned to Uriel Hoax, who had maintained himself at a very respectable, safe distance from the two royals. You must be Uriel Hoax. I thank you for protecting my sister, Princess Clara Astor, to the best of your resources and abilities. My pleasure, Your Majesty. I couldn't go and leave her out and about now, could I? Betraying a business partner doesn't harbor good relations, now does it? Uriel asked rhetorically, chuckling to himself. Now I got to see two royals and the prince himself. Guess I'm luckier than most. Thank you, Your Majesty, for coming to help us. Those damn plants were starting to breathe down our necks until your troops arrived and their fleet hightailed it. Due to our current circumstances, I cannot offer you any meaningful reward. Rest assured, once Duke Draymore is dealt with, you shall be handsomely rewarded for your actions, the prince said. Candidly, Your Majesty, I believe that you coming to assist us, a den of smugglers, commoners, and disgraced nobles, balances out whatever reward you may have in mind. The deal struck between your sister, Princess Clara, and me is more than enough to ensure the prosperity of Woodshaft, my home, for decades to come. Granted, if you win, he chuckled again. I will throw my lot with you regardless, my prince. I am at your service. If that's your decision, my dear Uriel, then shall we finalize our deal? We shall remain here for some time to make sure every Drazan is dead and to load the promised goods in ships, Clara said, stepping forth. But of course, Princess. Allow me a moment of respite, however. The defense of my station left me drained, and I would very much enjoy a glass of whiskey and a cigar. Victory always makes things better, Uriel said, bowing his head slightly before making his way to a hidden cabinet. Left with relative privacy, Clara turned to her brother and opened a private channel with him. Come, brother dearest, I have something to show you. The scanners were able to pick up the fight between the Noir Navio and the Drazan fleet, and more than that. The Noir what? He muttered, flabbergasted. You recorded the battle? The prince asked, unamused. With a motion of his hand, his escort stepped back, giving them space. You expected me not to? Oh, brother dearest, it was a thrilling, captivating experience. It may be limited to scanner data, but the sentiment is unparalleled, dreadful and suspenseful, but truly brilliant. Wyatt has exceeded my expectations tenfold. To think he could command an unknown type of destroyer vessel in such a manner, she exclaimed giddily. Wyatt? The prince repeated his name in a murmur. I thought Cynthia was the one commanding the black ship. Trust me, brother dearest, I love Cynthia and trust her with my life, but she knows nothing about naval command. No, I am certain it was Wyatt who sat at the captain's chair during that frenetic engagement. Regardless of my opinion, we will know what transpired once they arrive. She then clasped her hands. I hope the ship's systems were able to record the battle. I would love to add that to my collection. To have a first real account of such a marvelous ship in full display in combat? It may not be a fighter, but Wyatt made it dance like one. I am transfixed by his abilities, and I am going to reprimand him harshly for his idiotic, reckless behavior. The princess took in a deep breath to calm herself, crossing her arms in exasperation. In the meantime, brother dearest, do you plan to pursue the Drazan? She asked with a serious tone. We won't be able to catch them before they jump out. Suits me well. That was my original plan, to force them out of the fight. Drazan raiders are opportunistic cowards, the prince said with disdain. Let us leave those thoughts aside. I am eager to see your recordings, Clara. It may answer some quandaries of mine.